All right, we are starting our first full workday on assignment 7. When we introduced at the end of last class, we started with our photo reference and then learned ways we could find and create even our own different stylized inspiration for how we might approach that photo reference. I have a lot of different directions here to play with, and I showed you how to set it up in Photoshop and how to sketch it. So I'll review that quickly. It's all in my assignment 7 folder. And I look for my PSD file, which I mark as green with my name. And we're going to open that up in Photoshop. Now, this is as far as I got, and it looks fairly messy and chaotic, and that's actually good, because you want there to be a lot of energy in this sketch phase. You don't want it to look really stiff. You don't want it to be exact. You don't want to worry about erasing or refining edges. You just want to put down material, right? Just like doing a base coating on a traditional painting if you're doing oil or acrylic. What you want to fight against is all that white space. And so I've done it in a few layers. First I did just a pretty simple sketch, and I did that by creating my own brush. So I'm going to review with you how you can create your own brush. And then I did a base color behind it like this, so that my sketch just kind of allowed me to know where to put certain of the highlights and the shadows and things, just to get a sense of it. So before I continue with that, I have my references up on the top, and I have them locked in a folder. Right? I also have some references down on the bottom. And really, all of these are helpful. It's up to me how much I follow any of them, right? Do I try to match the photograph? I would say that's kind of my smallest worry, right? Instead, I want to just try to get the shapes and the overall form. And then I can take colors from my reference. I can take kind of brush size and edge control ideas from my reference. And of course, I can always go rogue and do my own thing as well. But I've got a lot of colorful reference, which is helpful. So if all of your reference is incredibly bland, like photo reference often is, it's good to get some colorful painting inspiration as a reference so that you can steal color from that as opposed to just using your swatches or using the usual color selectors. All right, so how did I make a brush? Well, I created a new layer that was unlocked, and I'll just keep this. I'm going to call it a brush preset layer. And on that layer, I did not use the brush that I made. Instead, I'm just going to start where all of you can start, with the hard round pressure size brush. It's under General Brushes. How do we get to there? We click on the brush tool. We do not click on the color replacement tool, the mixer brush tool. We do not click on the history brush tool. We just want the standard brush tool, right? And we definitely don't want the pencil tool. So with the brush tool, our settings are up at the top, as they are for most of our tools in Photoshop. And the first thing you do is you select which brush and what size. So I like a size that's around 100 pixels. To me, on an 8x10, I'm doing 11x14, but it's roughly the size of a pencil eraser. But remember, I'm going to use pressure sensitivity. So when I scroll down and open the General Brushes folder here, and you can experiment with their other brushes, but I want you to know how a brush works first. I'm going to pick the hard round pressure size brush. So with that, it allows me to control the size, both through the maximum size that I set in the tool settings and the hardness, which I set with this slider, right? To remind you, very little hardness will give you a brush with a really soft edge, like that. A lot of hardness will give you a brush with a very crisp edge, like that. Okay, now I'm going to play with that and get used to my tablet, pretending I'm making a brush that's this time is going to be very open. So if I dipped a bristle brush, a hog's hair brush for oil painting, for what's called scumbling or sketching, which is the phase I'm in now, and I dipped just the tip of it in ink, and then I pressed that ink to the page, if it was a really stiff brush, it might look something like this, right? And I'll do some flyaways, because maybe the ink splatters a little. Now, how do I turn that into a brush I can use? I use my rectangular marquee tool. I select the shape around it. We want to make sure that we're at a high enough resolution. So you go to image size. You want to be minimum 8 by 10 by 300. I'm at 11 by 14 by 350. And then I'm going to hit Command C to copy it. That puts it onto the clipboard. You can also do it with Edit and Copy. This is just reviewing what we did at the end of last class. Now I'm going to say File in Photoshop and New, and that will automatically populate with the dimensions of what's on the clipboard. So I don't even need to name it because this is just a transitional step, and I say Create, and then I paste. Edit, Paste. This puts my brush on a new layer just like that. And then what I do is I go to Edit and I say Define Brush Preset. Now, if you want to use this brush over and over again, you can save this file. But I'm just going to call this Open Brush. And I always put my name in it, Karl. Okay, now, when I use this brush, it looks like that. Not too useful. But if I take its size down to around 100, right? You'll see it like that. Now this is what a standard brush will do. It's not pressure sensitive and it doesn't change its angle. It's always locked in its angle. So if I just press once, it gives me what I designed. And if I click and drag, you see how it repeats. Ooh. Which is a good way to get textures. But the problem is it's a very mechanical looking texture. It doesn't look organic like a real brush. And a lot of digital painting is about imitating traditional forms of painting, so like an oil painting brush. So what can I do? I go to Window and Options. Come on. And I go in the Window Options, I look for Brush Settings. And that will put it in your sidebar here. Brush settings are incredibly important to digital painting. The first thing you want to play with is shape dynamics. And really this is the one-stop shop, the shape dynamics. The first thing I'm going to play with is I'm going to vary its size a little bit. Because even if it's locked, a brush will not always hit the exact same way when it touches down, even if its angle is locked. The next thing I'm going to play with is the angle jitter. And you can see in the preview here, this makes all the difference. It means each time you press it, it will be at a different angle. So just by pressing, it's like sponge painting. But then when I do this, then it's a lot more believable as an organic brush. And then the next thing I want to do is set the control to pin pressure. And that allows the scale to be thicker or thinner based on how hard I press. The option you lose when you do a customized brush is you lose the option for hardness, right? But by making all these little flyaways at the edge, you'll notice that this brush will never be 100% hard-edged. And that way it can blend in. So I'm just testing it out here, but if I use a color, like so, right? And then I use another color, like so. You'll see how those little flyaways at the end start to blend those colors together, even though I'm at 100% opacity. And then if I take another color and I put it at a lower opacity, you can see how I can mix between those and really get a nice painting texture. Okay, so now how can I use this brush? I go back to my project and I'm going to lock my brush preset. So if I ever want to recreate that brush, I easily can just from this Photoshop file, no matter what computer I'm on. And you can do the same thing in Photopea. You can define a brush preset under Edit in Photopea. And now I'm going to go back to my sketch and my painting here. And now before I go too much further, I'm going to move it around. I'm going to select both of those layers. And before I do too much painting, I'm going to use this opportunity to transform, make my painting a little bit bigger, which will help soften my edges a bit, and maybe even warp it a little bit, because I can see what's a little wrong with my sketch at this point. So I might tweak it. With distort like this. This is the beauty of digital painting. And I can just take my sketch layer and I can warp that to bring certain parts down. Widen certain parts, narrow others. The eye is in the wrong place, so then I can just use my lasso, just all on your sketch. This is interrogating your subject matter and kind of getting it to where you want. That's a little bit better just to start to build up on. Okay, now I have these layers, right? I have my paint underneath, and I have this rough sketch. Now, is this sketch even helpful anymore? Remember, I show in the assignment there are kind of two main approaches to digital painting. One is just shape painting, which would be just starting with this. Okay, and then building up, building up, building up. The other is to sketch first, traditionally with charcoal or like vine charcoal on a toned canvas, and then to start filling in on top of your sketch. So I'm trying to show you both. And what I can do at this point is I can actually blend my sketch in to my shape painting just by taking its opacity down. Right? I can even play with a blending mode, like that. Let's try. Yeah, I think that works. Okay, now I'm actually going to merge those together. So now I just have one kind of sketch layer. And now I can lock that sketch. I've kind of blocked it in. Now it's time to do the rough painting. So that's what I call this layer. I usually do my digital paintings in about 3 to 4 paint layers. I do a sketch, I do a rough fill where I try to fill everything and at 100% opacity, and then I do refined layers. Since I already have filled in the background, my rough painting, I'm going to do it at about 70% opacity. So I'm going to take that brush that I designed. You can see it at the bottom of your brush settings. This is the one I called Open Brush. And when I paint with it, I have a green color selected, right? You can see that all those brush settings are with it. All right, now I'm going to set it to 70% opacity, maybe even 75. And I'm going to start my rough painting. Now, sometimes you'll want to see your reference a little bit better. And what I'm going to play with is this reference and this reference. This one was AI, but it gives me the general composition I want. And this one is really out there. So to help with that, just because this helps me out, I'm going to go to my references. I'm going to unlock them. And I'm going to make a duplicate of this one. Command J. And then I'm going to move that duplicate down.